The marble lobby of the Sterling Hollow Hotel smelled like white peonies and money when I pushed through the revolving brass doors at exactly 7:14 on a Saturday evening in late October. A string quartet was playing something soft and tasteful near the koi pond that my capital had paid to install. Waiters in charcoal vests floated between clusters of guests balancing flutes of Dom Perignon on silver trays. Above the sweeping reclaimed oak staircase, a 20-foot banner announced in gold foil letters, "Grand Opening Sterling Hollow, a Julian Beck property." There was no mention of my name anywhere. My husband was standing on the second-floor mezzanine, one manicured hand resting on the banister, the other wrapped around the waist of a tall redhead in an emerald silk gown. He was laughing at something she had whispered into his ear. His custom Tom Ford tuxedo caught the light from the 12 antique crystal chandeliers I had personally approved the invoice for, the week my father-in-law's forged signature had first crossed my desk. He had not noticed me yet. Neither had his mother, who was holding court near the champagne tower, her face lifted into that practiced socialite smile she wore like a weapon. Behind me, the revolving door kept turning. 4 uniformed deputies from the Napa County Sheriff's Office stepped through in a tight diamond formation, their radios squawking low at their shoulders. Behind them came 12 men in navy coveralls, with the logo of a commercial repossession firm stitched across their chests. The lead deputy, a broad-shouldered man named Sergeant Holbrook, gave me a small nod. I unlatched the leather briefcase I was carrying and pulled out the thick cream-colored folder containing a writ of replevin, an emergency injunction, and a notice of lease termination signed by a federal magistrate at 4 o'clock that afternoon. The string quartet stopped playing. 300 guests turned toward the doors at once, champagne flutes suspended mid-air. My husband looked down from the mezzanine, and his face drained of all its color in under 2 seconds. My name is Elise Bellamy Beck, though by the end of that October night I would only be keeping half of that name. I am 31 years old. I graduated from Cornell School of Hotel Administration at 21, got my MBA from Wharton at 24, and at 26, I became the youngest senior portfolio manager in the history of Ashworth Heritage REIT, a commercial real estate trust with $42 billion under management, and a specialty in luxury hospitality properties across the American West. I met Julian Beck at a hotel industry gala in San Francisco when I was 27. He was a mid-level operations manager at a Four Seasons with a charming smile, a pedigree mother from old Pasadena money, and very big dreams. He said I was the most brilliant woman he had ever met. He said he wanted to build something real with me. 2 years later we were married at his mother's estate in Montecito, and 1 year after that he came to me with a business plan. He wanted to build a boutique hotel in Napa, a 24-room jewel box with a Michelin-starred restaurant, a wine library, and a private spa. He had the vision, he said. He just needed the capital. I had the capital. I had inherited a trust from my late grandfather, a steel heir from Pittsburgh, and I had grown that trust aggressively through my career. When Julian presented me with his business plan, I did what any disciplined investor would do. I restructured my personal holdings, liquidated a portion of my long-term bond position, and personally funded $580,000 of startup capital for the Sterling Hollow Hotel. I did it through a holding company I owned outright. I had my attorney paper every single dollar. Julian cried when I handed him the first wire confirmation. He said he would never forget this. He said I was his partner in every sense of the word. That was 18 months before the grand opening. 6 weeks before that Saturday night, I had been sitting at my desk at Ashworth Heritage's San Francisco office when my executive assistant forwarded me an Instagram post from the account of a Napa Valley lifestyle influencer. The caption read, "Soft launch preview at Sterling Hollow Hotel, the future of Napa hospitality. Congrats to Julian Beck and his incredible team." I scrolled through the photos. There was the infinity pool I had approved the design budget for. There was the wine library with its 12-foot ladder. There was my husband, in a cream linen suit, with his arm around a tall redhead in a floral sundress who was laughing into his neck. I had not been invited to the soft launch. I did not throw my phone. I did not cry. I did not call him. I walked down the hall to my boss, a sharp 70-year-old woman named Margaret Ashworth, who had founded the REIT in 1986 and who had been my mentor since my first internship. I closed her door. I told her what I had just seen. I told her everything I suspected, going all the way back to the small inconsistencies I had noticed in the quarterly reports Julian's CFO had been sending me. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I was done, she picked up her desk phone and made 2 calls. The first was to our forensic accounting division. The second was to our general counsel. "We're going to do this quietly," she said. "And we're going to do this correctly. You are going to act exactly the way you always act until we have every single piece." I had gone home that night, kissed my husband on the cheek, asked him how his day had been, and slept beside him without any trouble at all. Over the next 6 weeks, the forensic team delivered everything. Julian had forged my signature on a supplemental construction loan of $490,000 from a private lender in Sonoma, collateralized against a piece of land he did not actually own. He had forged his mother's signature on an unsecured personal line of credit worth $300,000 to cover cost overruns on the restaurant build-out. The redhead's name was Corinne Vale. She was 26 years old, a former cocktail server at the Four Seasons where Julian used to work, and he had hired her as the hotel's director of guest experience at an annual salary of $190,000. He had purchased her a pearl-white Porsche Macan through a corporate leasing account, using the business's tax ID, and had listed it on the books as a shuttle vehicle for VIP guests. She had moved into one of the penthouse suites 3 months ago. And the piece that tied a bow around it all, the piece that I had genuinely not expected, came in a sealed manila envelope delivered to my office by a courier the Wednesday before the grand opening. Julian had filed for divorce. He had not told me. The papers had been served to my personal attorney's office instead of to me directly, which was a filing error on his lawyer's part that turned out to be the single most important mistake Julian Beck ever made. Because by the time I read those papers, I had already laid every single piece of my trap. The papers alleged that I had been an emotionally absent wife, that I had failed to support his entrepreneurial dreams, and that he was seeking to retain full ownership of the Sterling Hollow Hotel and its associated commercial leaseholds. He had attached a supplemental filing requesting that the court recognize Corinne Vale as a domestic partner of material significance and that he be granted preliminary custody of the unborn child she was allegedly carrying. I looked at that sonogram image stapled to page 17. I looked at it for a long time. Then I made a copy, and I put it in a folder, and I went back to work. On the mezzanine of Sterling Hollow Hotel at 17 minutes past 7 on that Saturday night, my husband descended the sweeping staircase one slow, terrible step at a time, his face locked in an expression of pure corporate panic. Corinne Vale stayed on the second floor, gripping the banister like a woman watching a car accident in slow motion. My mother-in-law, Patricia Beck Whitford, had already started moving toward me across the lobby floor, her heels clicking sharply against the imported travertine. Julian reached the bottom of the stairs and tried to smile. It did not work. "Sweetheart," he said, in a voice pitched just loud enough to carry to the nearest cluster of guests. "Elise, darling, I didn't expect you." "No," I said. "I imagine you didn't." I took the folder from my briefcase and handed it not to him but to Sergeant Holbrook, who took it with both hands and stepped forward into the center of the lobby. The sergeant was a man who had seen too much of the world to be impressed by travertine floors and crystal chandeliers, and when he raised his voice to address the crowd, he did not shout. He simply spoke, in the carrying register of a man who has given hard news to a lot of people. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. By order of the Superior Court of Napa County, we are here to execute an emergency writ of replevin and a preliminary injunction freezing all physical and commercial assets located at this address." The lobby went so quiet I could hear the koi in the pond breaking the surface. "The amount secured under this writ is $580,000, plus accrued interest, plus 18% penalty, representing a defaulted commercial obligation," Sergeant Holbrook continued. "Please do not interfere with the officers or the representatives of the repossession firm. Anyone who attempts to obstruct this process will be placed under arrest for interference with a civil court order. A collective inhale rippled through the crowd. 300 phones came out of 300 evening bags and jacket pockets. Julian's face had gone from pale to a color I had previously only seen on a cadaver in a college biology textbook. He lunged forward and grabbed at the folder in Sergeant Holbrook's hands. The deputy on the sergeant's left moved one step forward and my husband stopped moving. He stopped moving the way a man stops when he has just realized his chest is 3 inches from the butt of a service weapon. "Mr. Beck," Sergeant Holbrook said mildly, "you are going to take 2 full steps back. Thank you." Julian took 2 steps back. His lips were moving without sound, the way a man's lips move when he is adding up numbers that will not add up. His mother reached me then. Patricia Beck Whitford was 64 years old. A former runner-up for Miss California 1979, and for 35 years, she had been the kind of woman who could empty a room just by walking into it. She was wearing a champagne-colored Chanel gown that had been altered 3 times that week by a seamstress whose bill I had privately paid for out of Julian's supposed marketing budget. She stopped 6 inches from my face and hissed through a smile that no longer reached her eyes. "You insane little witch," she whispered. "What do you think you're doing? This is my son's night. You are embarrassing yourself." I turned my head and looked at her. I did not lower my voice. "I'm sorry," I said pleasantly. I was under the impression I was not close family. I was under the impression tonight was reserved for close family. So if you'd like to explain to your son why his actual legal documented wife is standing in the lobby of a hotel she personally funded, I'd invite you to take that up with him. In the meantime, Patricia, you might want to step back. I would hate for one of the movers to accidentally clip you with a dolly. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Behind her, the 12 men in navy coveralls were already moving. They bypassed the guests with the brutal efficiency of a surgical team. 2 of them went straight for the reception desk, a custom-milled slab of reclaimed walnut that I had personally sourced from a sawmill in Oregon. 4 more headed for the wine library. 2 more for the restaurant kitchen, where the Michelin hopeful tasting menu was currently being plated for the evening seated dinner at 9. The head chef, a man named Luke who I had always liked, came running out of the kitchen in a panic, saw the uniforms, saw my face, and very quietly went back into the kitchen to tell his line cooks to stop cooking. My husband found his voice. "You can't do this," he said, and now he was shouting. "You cannot do this. These are commercial premises. I hold the operating license. I hold the commercial lease. I am the owner of record. You are my wife, Elise. My wife. You can't come in here and—" "Am I?" I asked him. "Am I your wife, Julian? Because my personal attorney received a very interesting envelope on Wednesday. I'd be happy to discuss its contents with you. In fact, I think we should discuss them in front of all of these very nice people who came to celebrate your big night." Julian's mouth closed. I turned toward the crowd. I turned toward the phones. I made absolutely sure that every single camera in the lobby had a clean line of sight to my face, and I spoke in the calm, level, client briefing voice I had been using in boardrooms since I was 24 years old. "My husband filed for divorce 3 days ago," I said. "He did not tell me. He served the papers to my attorney, instead of to me, which is a procedural error but not a legally fatal one. In his filing, he asked the court to grant him sole ownership of the Sterling Hollow Hotel. He also asked the court to formally recognize a Miss Corinne Vale." I gestured up at the mezzanine, where Corinne had gone very, very still as his domestic partner, and to grant him preliminary custody of the child she is allegedly carrying. "Congratulations, Corinne. Your boss is a bigamist in spirit, if not yet in law." Somebody in the crowd laughed. The laugh was quickly smothered. "Now," I said, "there is one small problem with my husband's plan. 2 problems, actually. Would anyone like to guess what they are?" Julian stepped forward. "Elise, stop, please. The first problem," I continued, "is that the $580,000 of startup capital my husband used to build this hotel came from my personally held family trust, wired through a holding company I own 100% of. and papered as a secured commercial obligation with a senior lien on every single physical asset inside this building. My husband missed his first debt service payment in July. He missed his second in August. He missed his third in September. Under the terms of the promissory note he personally signed, I have the legal right to accelerate the entire balance upon default, which I did, through my attorney. This morning, the repossession team had reached the restaurant. I heard the sound of a walk-in refrigerator being rolled out on a pallet jack. The second problem, I said, is a little more interesting. I reached back into my briefcase and pulled out a second document. This one was bound in blue. It was 63 pages long. It had been signed and notarized 17 months ago, before Julian had ever held the first set of keys to this building. The second problem, Julian, is that you don't own this hotel. He blinked at me. I'm sorry, he said. You don't own it. You don't own the furniture. You don't own the fixtures. And you absolutely do not own the land. You hold a 10-year commercial lease on this property, executed by an entity called Ashworth Meridian Holdings LLC, which as of 17 months ago, became the registered owner of the entire 3.2-acre parcel this building is sitting on. I watched his face. I watched the exact moment it registered. Ashworth Meridian Holdings, I said gently, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Ashworth Heritage REIT, where, as you may recall, I have been the senior portfolio manager for the Western Hospitality Division for the past 5 years. I have managed this specific parcel's portfolio since the day we acquired it. The day we acquired it, Julian, was 6 weeks before you sat down at our kitchen table and told me you had found the perfect location for your dream hotel. I was the seller. I was also the landlord. You have been paying rent to me this entire time. Patricia Beck Whitford made a small, strangled sound. Every commercial lease in the state of California, I continued, contains a standard moral turpitude clause. It also contains a fraud clause. It also contains a clause voiding the lease upon the discovery of any criminal act committed on the premises or in connection with the tenant's business operations. Federal wire fraud, forged signatures on secured debt instruments, and the unauthorized use of a commercial tax ID to purchase personal property for a romantic partner are 3 distinct criminal acts, Julian. My forensic accounting team documented all 3 over the last 6 weeks. The report is 240 pages long. I have a copy right here in my briefcase. I am going to hand it to your mother in a moment, and I would like her to read the pages I have flagged with yellow tabs, because she is going to have some questions about her own signature. Patricia's knees buckled. One of the deputies caught her elbow. As of 47 minutes ago, I said, your lease is terminated. Effective immediately. You are currently trespassing on commercial property owned by my firm. You have 15 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises, after which you will be escorted off by the Napa County Sheriff's Office. Your mother will be escorted off with you. Miss Vale, you are welcome to gather your things as well, but please be advised that the Porsche Macan parked in space 7 of the valet lot is titled to a corporate entity I have just legally dissolved, and it will be driven back to the dealership tonight. Corinne Vale, on the mezzanine, began to cry. Julian took 1 step backward, then another. Then he sat down on the bottom step of the staircase. He sat down like his legs had simply given up on the project of holding him upright, and he put his face in his hands, and he did not move. The lobby had become completely silent except for the sound of the repossession team efficiently dismantling the life Julian Beck had built with my money. His mother recovered first. I had expected her to. Patricia Beck Whitford had not survived 35 years in Pasadena society by being easy to knock down. She straightened her spine, pulled her elbow out of the deputy's hand, and marched directly over to the staircase where her son was sitting. She bent down. She looked him in the face. And in a voice low enough that only the 3 of us and the nearest deputy could hear, she said, "What did you do with my signature, Julian?" He did not lift his head. "The line of credit," she said. "The $300,000 line of credit at City National. I got a call from my banker yesterday. I thought it was a mistake. I thought somebody had stolen my identity. Julian, look at me, what did you do?" He mumbled something into his hands. Louder. his mother said. The kitchen build-out, he said. It went over budget. The equipment, the vents, the gas lines. It was going to be $80,000, Mom. I was going to pay it back out of the first quarter's receipts. I swear to God, She slapped him. She slapped him across the face with the flat of her palm, hard enough that the sound carried all the way to the revolving doors, and she did it with the full, furious commitment of a woman who had just watched her financial life get walked off a cliff by her only son. You forged my name, she said. You forged my name. I am 64 years old, Julian. I have $1,200,000 to my name. That line of credit was unsecured. Do you understand what unsecured means? It means they come after my house. They come after my retirement. They come after everything. And you. She could not finish the sentence. She stepped back from him, shaking. Julian lifted his head for the first time. There were red marks on his cheek. His eyes went to her, then to me, then up to the mezzanine, where Corinne was still standing, and he held out one hand toward his mistress, with a look of almost religious pleading. Corinne, he said. Honey, come here. We need to figure this out. We need to the baby. We need to… Corinne wiped her face with the back of her hand. She wiped it again, this time harder, smearing her mascara in long dark streaks down her cheekbones. She looked down at my husband from the mezzanine, and she laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Julian, she said, are you out of your mind? I'm not coming down there. I'm not going anywhere with you. You told me you owned this hotel. You told me your wife was a cold, frigid workaholic who didn't understand you. You told me the divorce papers had already been signed. You told me this was going to be our life, you understand me? You told me I was going to be the general manager of this property by next quarter. I am 26 years old, Julian. I am not spending my 20s helping a bankrupt con artist pay off his mother's credit card debt. Corinne, he said. The baby. Think about the baby. She rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes. There's no baby, Julian, she said. There was never a baby. I bought the sonogram online for $35. I needed you to divorce your wife fast enough that I could be the wife of record when the hotel opened. That was the plan, sweetheart. That was always the plan. I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but honestly, given what's happening in your lobby right now, I think we can both agree I made the correct business decision. She turned, picked up a small Louis Vuitton overnight bag she had apparently stashed behind the banister earlier that afternoon, and walked down the back stairs toward the kitchen exit. I never saw her again. Julian made a sound I will not describe. He made the sound a man makes when 3 lies collapse on him, at exactly the same second, and then he started to cry, quietly, into his hands, sitting on the bottom step of a staircase that he did not own, in a lobby that had never belonged to him, in a building that he was about to be physically escorted out of by 4 armed deputies of the Napa County Sheriff's Office. I closed my briefcase. I walked over to him. I crouched down so our faces were level, and I spoke to him in a voice that nobody else in the lobby could hear. You should have invited me, Julian, I said. If you'd invited me tonight, if you'd treated me with the basic dignity of a wife, I would have sat in the second row and clapped politely and let you run this place into the ground on your own. You would have had maybe 18 months before the debt caught up with you. You would have had a soft landing. You would have walked away with your reputation. Instead, you told me I wasn't close family. Instead, you told me the bills were overdue and asked me to wire the money anyway. You mistook my silence for permission. That was the mistake. Don't ever mistake a woman's silence for permission. I stood up. I walked out of the lobby of the Sterling Hollow Hotel at exactly 7 minutes past 8 in the evening, past a repossession team that was already halfway done with their night's work, past 300 guests who were frantically calling their Ubers, past a string quartet that was quietly packing up its instruments, past my sobbing mother-in-law, past my catatonic husband, and out through the revolving brass doors into the cool October night. A valet brought my car around. I tipped him $60. I drove home to the house Julian had never been able to afford without me, and I slept for 10 uninterrupted hours. The divorce was finalized 4 months later, in the Superior Court of Napa County, on a gray Thursday morning in mid-February. Julian showed up in an off-the-rack suit from a discount department store. He had lost 20 pounds. His hairline had receded in a way that suggested very significant stress. He sat next to his court-appointed attorney, because his original lawyer had withdrawn from the case when Julian could no longer pay the retainer, and he did not look at me once during the entire 3-hour proceeding. His attorney made the argument I had known he would make. He argued that Julian had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in federal court the previous month, and that the $580,000 commercial obligation to my holding company should be discharged as part of the bankruptcy estate. Fresh start, clean slate, standard stuff. He was not a bad lawyer. He was just working with a client who had committed crimes. My attorney, a terrifying woman named Regina Ortiz who billed at $1,100 an hour and was worth every penny, stood up and walked the judge through Section 523, a 2A of the United States Bankruptcy Code, which states that any debt incurred through false pretenses, false representations, or actual fraud is explicitly non-dischargeable. She then handed the judge a bound copy of my forensic team's 240-page report, which documented with notarized precision every single forged signature, every single fraudulent transfer, and every single act of wire fraud Julian Beck had committed during the construction and operation of the Sterling Hollow Hotel. The judge read for 90 minutes. When she was finished, she took off her glasses and looked at my husband with the expression of a woman who has seen every variety of human failure and is no longer capable of being surprised. "Mr. Beck," she said, "you cannot use the bankruptcy court to wash your hands of federal crimes. The debt survives, in full, with accrued penalties. The plaintiff's request for a permanent wage garnishment order is granted. 25% of your gross income, in perpetuity, until the obligation is satisfied." He was 42 years old. At 25% of a mid-level hospitality manager's salary, the math worked out to roughly 31 years of payments. The divorce itself was granted on the grounds of fraud. He received no settlement. He received no alimony. He received a single-occupancy studio apartment in Vallejo and a job offer from a chain motel outside Fairfield, which he took because he had no other options. His mother lost her house in Pasadena to the creditors at City National the following spring. She moved into a rental condo in Bakersfield. I have not heard her speak my name since the night at the hotel, though I understand from mutual acquaintances that she has had several things to say about me privately, none of them flattering, none of them accurate, and all of them deeply, satisfyingly irrelevant to the life I am now living. Corinne Vale, I am told, married a cryptocurrency investor 6 months later. I wish her the same joy she brought to my marriage. 1 year to the day after the grand opening, I stepped out of a town car onto the curb in front of the Sterling Hollow Hotel. The brass doors had been repainted in a deep matte black. The 20-foot banner was gone. In its place, a small, tasteful sign in brushed steel letters read, "The Hollow, a Bellamy hospitality property." I had kept my maiden name this time. I walked inside. The reclaimed walnut reception desk had been moved to a different part of the lobby. The koi pond was still there. The chandeliers were still there, because honestly, they were beautiful, and I had paid for them. The redhead was gone. The con artist was gone. The Tom Ford tuxedo was gone. My general manager, a woman named Priya Chatterjee, who had been the food and beverage director at a Rosewood property in Texas before I hired her, met me at the door with a cappuccino and the quarterly earnings report. We had closed the first 3 quarters of operation at 147% of projection. The restaurant had been reviewed favorably by the San Francisco Chronicle. The wine library was booked for private events 6 months out. I had hired Luke back as the executive chef at a salary that was twice what my husband had been paying him, and he had brought his entire line with him. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. An automated notification from my holding company's banking app. The 15th of the month. Julian's garnished wages had just cleared. $812.43. It would not even cover the valet tips for a weekend. It would arrive on the 30th of the month, and the 15th of the month after that. and the 30th of the month after that. For 31 years. I sipped my cappuccino and I walked through the lobby of my hotel. The lesson of this story, for any woman who has ever sat across a dinner table from a man who told her she was not close enough family to be invited to his own grand opening, is this: your silence is not permission, your kindness is not weakness, and your investment in someone else's dream is not a gift. It is a contract. Paper every single dollar, title every single asset, read every single lease. And when the day comes that a man mistakes the size of your generosity for the size of your tolerance, you do not need to raise your voice. You do not need to cry. You do not need to argue. You just need to have already owned the building. If you are standing at the beginning of a story like this one, if you have noticed the small inconsistencies, the unfamiliar names, the invoices that do not add up, I am telling you tonight to trust yourself. Call your attorney. Call a forensic accountant. Call your boss. Build your file quietly and completely, and do not let anyone tell you that your suspicion is hysteria. Hysteria is what men call it when a woman is 3 moves ahead of them on a board they did not know they were playing on. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about women who were told to be smaller, who chose to be larger, and who walked out of the buildings they had built while the men inside were still figuring out whose name was on the deed. My name is on the deed. My name was always on the deed.